Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Adrian Lo, Associate Director of the Urban Design and Development International Program, as well as International Expert here at the Thammasat Design School in Thailand. I am also the course coordinator for this year's International Multidisciplinary Summer School. My presentation today is about an introduction to systemic design. Following on from the ideas of systems thinking and its insights on seeing the many interconnections across multiple disciplines and sectors in order to identify high-impact leverage points, and in contrast to conventional design processes of learning by doing and prototyping, systemic design combines these two aspects, such that we are constantly zooming in and out of the problems, needing integrated thinking as opposed to binary or oppositional thinking, and starts to be what we can call co-creative through collaborative design. Systemic design starts to move beyond traditional design, or design 1.0, through product or service design and organizational transformation design towards social transformation design, where the scale of the complexity increases. Referring to the schools of systems thinking, the classical approach sees things as static, whereas the systems thinking approach sees things as dynamic, consisting of patterns of behavior over time. Rather than the classical approach of seeing things one at a time or one tree at a time, systems thinking encourages us to see the whole forest. In other words, seeing things in the context of relationships. And rather than seeing things in a linear fashion or straight line thinking, where causes are not seen in relationship to other causes, a systems thinking approach is viewing causality as a loop or as an ongoing process where effects feedback to influence causes. While systems thinking is an established approach to address the complexity of today's challenges and crises, by combining systems thinking with design thinking, it is possible to achieve effective change by identifying high leverage interventions. This lecture follows on from an understanding of systems thinking towards a systemic approach to design, which requires complex societal challenges to be tackled from a multidisciplinary and organizational perspective. We will use the TDS KUL WHO Technique Summer School of July 2022 as a case study to explore how the participants adopted a systemic design approach to develop a multiple disease treatment center with innovative strategies that could withstand natural hazards, as well as use natural daylight and ventilation to prevent the spread of infectious diseases whilst controlling indoor thermal comfort. To begin our systemic design journey last year, we engaged in various preparatory activities to understand the health, institutional, and cultural background, with visits to vernacular buildings such as the Agricultural Museum Complex in Pathum Thani and Jim Thompson's Health Museum in Bangkok, to understand the spatial and environmental best practices. The participants also visited the 3 project sites and decided on which site they would continue to work to develop their multiple disease treatment center, which had to be adaptable to inner city built-up areas such as Ari and Bangkok, peri-urban informal settlements such as Bang Simong and Nonthaburi, as well as rural settings such as Klong Sam and Pathum Thani. In the first week of the program, students were introduced to a holistic way to handle complexity through systems thinking. The dynamic systems analysis coached the participants through successive phases of analysis, from understanding the system and its driving forces towards a visual representation of their findings in the form of a systems map. The initial systemic thinking journey involved framing the system, listening to the system, and understanding the system. This process involved a series of exercises meant to explore how interactions and activities influence one another and to identify feedback loops. Participants in each team started out by exploring the forces that were detrimental to the system, also called inhibitors, as well as the forces that could generate positive dynamics in the system, also called enablers. They then focused on the most influential forces and analyzed those to understand their respective causes and effects, and how these feed into each other. This was captured by a series of causal patterns visualized as dynamic loops. Having analyzed the forces that influence the system and the inner dynamics of causes and effects, participants moved from the current towards the desired future system. They did this by clustering the aforementioned loops into thematic regions around central issues, which drove the system dynamics. This then creates what is called a systems map, which is a holistic and cohesive visualization of the various distinctive loops and the interconnections between these loops. In this example of a systems map by the group who looked at an existing informal settlement community of Bang Simon and Non-Faburi, we can see poor infrastructure, lack of hygiene, and poor waste management as being central issues, which affect the entire healthcare system in a poor urban neighborhood. Lack of hygiene, with lack of sanitation, with a generally unhealthy environment, can cause the spread of diseases, while social capital can overcome issues due to a strong sense of community resilience during the pandemic. The Midsummer School presentation gave each team an opportunity to test their understanding of the system by sharing their systems map to receive critical feedback, which led them to review their current understanding of the system and identify patterns that kept the current system from behaving according to their short-term and long-term objectives. Building on this acquired knowledge of the system, teams then recalibrated their systems map and highlighted those patterns that they would like to disrupt, mitigate, or shift. This then led to the identification of high-leverage interventions. Again, from the group who looked at an informal settlement community, we can see they identified community assets as key leverage points for change within the system. For example, they saw the multi-purpose building on the site that serves as a school to educate the children, but it, when times of need, can also be used as a multiple disease treatment center. This then shifts gears to the systemic design stage. In groups for 3 sites, participants develop ideas for a multiple disease treatment center. The proposal had to simultaneously produce a descriptive matrix by way of the criteria or design principles of a building and a building typology design to increase ventilation and control indoor temperature, relative humidity, as well as natural daylight. Groups collaborated to define the key criteria and strategies for this new building typology in various ways. The systemic design workshops were all about co-design that sought to articulate the leverage points with the most potential to improve the system. Students explored ideas for various interventions in terms of design strategies and beyond, ranging from lifestyle changes to policy recommendations. Design phase entailed the parallel production of a systemic matrix, or the matrix of prescriptive actions, and a building typology design, which was a schematic set of architectural drawings. On the first day of the co-design workshop, students were engaged in the production of a Lego sectional model. This concept model enabled the groups to investigate a possible intervention at their chosen site, while also considering sun orientation and angles, sun shading, cross-ventilation, prevailing wind, and other environmental aspects as discovered in their systems mappings. The groups had to take photographs of their model, on which they produced an annotated sketch section. Lego here is useful in this collaborative design process, as it allows people of all ages and disciplinary backgrounds to come together to explore ideas in 3-dimensional space. The remainder of the summer school saw the groups further develop their ideas initiated from this Lego sectional model into a proposal for a building design along with the matrix of strategies. Here, co-design brings ideas to the surface by testing ideas and presenting them to other groups for peer reviews, which brings the essential issues or leverage points from the system mapping back into focus. In parallel with each group's building typology design, they had to identify actionable items or leverage interventions for this systemic matrix. In the example of the group which looked at the agricultural community in Pathum Thani, they identified space requirements for the multiple disease treatment center, such as spaces for screening and isolation, but also environmental considerations such as daylighting, natural ventilation with south-facing openings, etc. These form the various prescriptive principles behind the design of the building to be applied to the actual building design. This task to produce a systemic matrix was part of the collaborative design process, where groups drew insights and visualized connections among the interrelated system issues, design proposals, and interventions, so that all these design actions were reinforcing each other, as seen in this overlay of a systems matrix over an image of the site. Items were added and articulated to the matrix in correlation with their systems map, strategies, and building design, as well as a roadmap, which was a step to strategize the leverage points towards a transitional or future system. As we can see in this roadmap by the group who looked at the informal settlement community in Bang Simon, they emphasize short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. Moving to the building design, each group had to identify detailed space requirements according to the specific needs of the site, from which then they had to develop a zoning diagram. This formed the basis to develop floor plans and sections, as well as a three-dimensional digital model, all of which were collaboratively refined towards a final presentation. In these images, we can see how each group zoned the infected in red and clean air areas in green to help with isolation and treatment. This group, based on the built-up area of Ari in Bangkok, show how they sought to retrofit the existing nursery school building on the site into a multiple disease treatment center with the extensive use of natural ventilation, taking into consideration the prevailing wind direction. The group working with the agricultural site in Pathum Thani, however, sought an innovative approach by having a modular design which could be repeated to achieve various functions over a larger area. Rather than one existing building, as per the other groups, this group had the freedom to explore how multiple structures could be interconnected to fulfill the space requirements, including separation of adult and children healthcare units, learning spaces, as well as screening and other programs. Here, Lego was used again as part of the design process to make iterative designs to see which option was most suited to a given scenario, considering how the buildings are modular and could be rearranged in different ways as needed. In summary, the Summer School 2022 experiment served to introduce system-wise approaches into architectural and design education by exploring the ways how systemic design can be mainstreamed into World Health Organization's technique network. With that, that concludes this introduction to systemic design. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email me for my contact details. Thank you for listening, everyone, and hoping to meet you all in the second half of this year's summer school to be held on site in Thammasat Rangsit Center in Thailand. Thank you.